this distinction. But Kant did argue that experience involves understanding, applying the categories which include the concepts to perceptions and organizing them, and this is how experience resolves. So also intuition, or the understanding, may apply the intuition or concept of time to perception. Kant mentions Aristotle's view and Spinoza's view, but only in the flash. Aristotle saw time as a category, Kant saw time as a pure a priori intuition. Einstein saw time as an empirical a posteriori category. Maybe my view, Beaton, is that time is both pure and empirical and can exist in many forms in the universe. But Spinoza believed that the universe itself was a substance and that it was rational, so that he called it God and that we exist in God, although it was really nature because it didn't have feelings, so it really wasn't alive, so it was not really God. Unless you believe in polytheism, because we exist as modifications of this substance. So for Spinoza, the mind of God may also contain the passage of time. Wait a second, okay. But Spinoza believed that the universe itself was a substance and that it was rational, so that he called it God, that we exist in God. Though this substance could not experience emotions, it did not feel pleasure or pain, so it could neither be expected to love anything, including love people. So for Spinoza, the mind of God may also contain the passage of time, unlike for Aristotle, Maimonides, who saw God as being immutable and outside time. So time does exist, since like as God also has a memory to make the past real and an understanding to make the future real. But Spinoza saw God as an infinite intellect, while our intellect is finite in power. So St. Thomas Aquinas argued that our intellect is infinite in a way, since we have the power to understand universals, which are concepts that are infinite in scope. So it seems that time is of a different kind in our mind from the kind of time that exists in the mind of God if it occupies the whole universe. And so time in our mind and time in the universe would be different in kind, even if we accept Spinoza's system of the universe. But Maimonides argues that before Spinoza that God cannot be the soul of the universe. He meant if God is seen as a prime mover or the necessary existence, which was how many prophets and philosophers defined God, though it really meant a totally different thing. And Spinoza used Aristotle's proofs and argued that God would be simple, immutable, immaterial, incorporeal, unique, and thus outside time and separate from this temporal world. But Spinoza's God is initially joined with the universe, is intimately joined with the universe, so that we are seen as the modifications of the infinite attributes of God. Also for Aristotle, also for the religions, God cannot be the spirit of the world because God created the world. So free will is possible, and thinking is a kind of free will, since we have the power of choice by thinking before we act instead of just acting by reflexes. And computers are free as well in a sense, but are even people really free? Since Aristotle denied it and argued against it, and so did Moses Maimonides and Benedict Spinoza and Albert Einstein, did he give a proof of it? Etc. Also, we refuted Aristotle's argument against free will. We called that Kant saw simplicity in two different senses. We even rejected the argument denying the possibility of free simple substances, where there is a gradual transition needed in any change, including willing, since our soul may be simple also, or at least since our soul may be composite but act in simple time dimension. Since Aristotle argued that time is really simple in nature, but as St. Augustine argued, we can transcend time, since our mind is able to connect the non-existent parts of time together. Also in Aristotle's other arguments, his procedure of splitting the object of mover and moving in his other proof, really, it is not valid, since you end up destroying the power of will if it had it going far enough this way. I think I said this. Also, the external agent proof against free will, it may be necessary to distinguish between an object absolutely in potential, incapable of acting at all, or even as a non-existent non-existing if creation is possible, and an object in relative potential when it is in act, but in relative potential to other things. You may be in act because you are always thinking, which includes a will always in act. So God himself may have free will, which is a necessary condition for any religion, just as thinking is. Maybe even if the faculty of emotion is necessary, if that is what makes us free, since that is spontaneous bursts or movements in our mind, and we may have the power to control, direct their expression in the world, or direct our thoughts within limits. This is from page 20. Copernican revolution. We still need to prove that we are free in actuality, even though proving that freedom is possible is already a great achievement in this world. It would seem an odd thing if we had to use 1,000 ways of proving that God exists that were listed in order to prove that we are free beings. It may be an immediate consequence of God's existence, since Maimonides, Kant, and Einstein said that need free will for any religion to be possible. Indeed, so would immortality of the soul follow immediately. My proof of the liberty in the world proceeds by showing that God exists first, as shown by 1,000 different ways, and so we must be free and religion is possible or necessary, instead of showing that religion is possible or necessary, so God must exist. To explain this, God, the father of logic, that is Aristotle, gave this logistic method of reasoning which defined logical reasoning for 2,000 years till after Immanuel Kant, who accepted it. Well, one form of the syllogism which Kant used is the hypothetical syllogism, which is if A then B, A therefore B. But that simply lists the condition of a series of conditions for an event to occur or an object to exist or even a certain quality, and it concludes that it occurs or exists if the conditions are met. By criticizing Aristotle, Maimonides, Spinoza, Kant, and Einstein, etc., really they were saying that free will is impossible, which means that the conditions for free will that they listed were not met and that they cannot be met. But I showed that all these conditions may be met so that the consequences of free will is possible. But these may be necessary conditions and not sufficient conditions for free will, and so need to show that they are real, not just possible. Since this is divine science, not religion, and we want the proofs of reason, if possible, and not faith of the heart. My strategy. What is the essential condition of freedom? Can you prove that it is met in the world? Aristotle said that if we are free, then we are both mover and moved, and for him it was not possible for several reasons. Page 21. New era in psychology, my Copernican revolution. That's it! Exclamation mark. Oh God. They ignored the law of inertia, really, and that is why they had trouble. Aristotle and others before Galileo Galilei believed that motion of an object in the world required a force to keep it acting on the object, or else its movement will end. But they did not yet discover the incredible law of inertia that maintains that motion is self-sustaining and requires no external force to keep it going. What is at rest remains at rest, and what is in motion remains in motion. On the contrary, if a force acts on it, then it may come to rest or change its trajectory. So we can add the law of inertia of Galileo Galilei, accepted by Isaac Newton and others, and advised by Albert Einstein in the realm of physics, and incorporate this law into psychology as well. I also revised that. Indeed, many experts feel that the soul is just the brain or projection of the brain, and the brain is part of the physical universe. And even Einstein seemed to believe that this view, since he tried to create a granulated theory of the universe. And his system included the whole universe, including rational beings, not just non-living things. And he did not believe in paradise universe, nor even a psychological one. In the sense, he denied human free will. Let alone that maybe he should have included algorithms, not just mathematics, since the world is not simply described by laws, but agents, like people or animals or computers, etc., are capable of making decisions. This may also help to explain the confusion in quantum mechanics when it seemed that the law of causality is broken, but it may also be due to the effect of electromagnetic fields playing a role in the experiments, or both. So we add the law of inertia to psychology, and say that the motion in our mind flows naturally like a meteor moving in the cosmos all around us. Our soul is always thinking, so we do not need an external agent or cause or need to postulate the active intellect, which is a separate intellect or incorporeal angel, which requires a series of other separate intellects or angels or gods to make our potential intellect into an intellect in actuality, as described by Al-Farabi and others. So like Isaac Newton removed the need to postulate separate intellects for the physical motion of the cosmos, planets, moons, and stars from the great Aristotelian system, I, Joseph B. Thom, removed the need for the separate intellects or angels, and maybe even the motion of the cosmos to explain the psychological motion of our intellect. Our will was part of our intellect for Aristotle. That is, it moves by the law of inertia. Oh God! Exclamation mark. Add one more law to the law, Newton's laws of motion. The flow of thoughts in the mind of human beings requires no external cause to keep it flowing or changing potential to actuality. This is always in motion and stays in motion naturally by the new psychological law of inertia. So we must add a faculty of will to human beings and to all models of the universe. A faculty that is in act, since we are always thinking. There is always a flow of thoughts in our mind. Our mind is freely in motion, like the world does not need to be moved or created every second. Once it is set in motion, it becomes fairly independent in many ways. But what is will? Question mark. Is it not the ability to think and make choices and simply to accept the true conclusions as true, usually at least, or act based on true conclusions, usually at least, which may take into account your feeling? Since you experience pleasure and pain also and care about that a lot, or they help preserve you by avoiding harm and seeking pleasure, as Aristotle said, is that how Spinoza saw God by calling him free? Question mark. Since it meant that what God thinks, that is, holds as true, is realized in the world necessarily as immediate effect. Maybe our intellect is like God's intellect, except that He has infinite will and our will is finite. And only some of our thoughts are true, and there is much that we don't even know. And so only some of our wishes of our will are realized in the universe. We have limited power, but God has infinite power. Free will. So it just proved that the law of inertia applies to our mind as well. But if the mind is really just the brain or projection of the brain, and psychology is just what we refer to when controlling set of instructions in memory rather than implemented by the structure of the brain as in biology, and it seems that the law of inertia is proven to the brain and mind as well as it is proved by the scientists for the physical universe. Since thoughts are just a frequent flow of ions, which are charged atoms or neurotransmitters, which are molecule particles, collections of atoms, in our brain nerve circuits where the laws of physics can be used. And brain damage, which occurs especially during wars of humanity, suggests that our mind or our soul is the brain itself. Since damage to the brain causes damage to the mind or soul, so the brain may be material. But matter is not just earth, water, air, or fire, as was once believed, but far more complex. Though really it is still true, since it is solid, liquid, gas, and light, which is the same thing. And James Clerk Maxwell even argued that electromagnetic waves can exist independently of matter, so our soul or mind may really be a sort of electromagnetic projection or independent entity. And Albert Einstein argued that matter and energy are interchangeable, so even if you accept Darwin's theory, it may be possible for the human being to evolve from a material being to become a being made up of independent fields of energy. Free will. So that SFD fallacy is avoided when the conception of time is the same in our mind and in the world. That is, when the series of causes originated in the other mind, like our mind. I mean, when another person is the cause of the series of appearances that comes to us, and the nature of time is the same in his mind, since he also has the intellect and memory and is able to unify time as we do. Time has meaning in psychological sense there, also as described by St. Augustine. So other minds have freedom, and hence so do we, since one of the arguments of Kant's third antinomy is valid, and the case of the other side of the antinomy fails, because the series of causes began in physical objects, while the nature of time is different even if it exists. So the syllogism uses only one concept of time in syllogism in the argument for free will, and it's valid. And the syllogism arguing against free will uses two concepts of time in the major and the minor premise instead of one concept of time, so it's fallacious. And so the third antimony, which is a problem and made worse by Einstein, is here finally resolved. And indeed we have even proving the existence of human free will. New era, exclamation mark. I, Joseph B. Thorne, did it, exclamation mark. No one in history has succeeded in proving that we have free will. Indeed, even the geniuses and the super geniuses like Aristotle argued that we have no free will, and neither does God. And Maimonides and others like Spinoza agree with him, and Kant argued that it is impossible for us to even know if we are free or not. Religion presupposes freedom, as Maimonides and Einstein and Kant have said. Is there a prize for this question mark? My Copernican revolution added another proof of God question mark. Spinoza gave a short proof of the existence of God in his masterpiece, The Ethics. Really, he gave about 5 short proofs of God there. And then Spinoza did impressive proof of the immortality of our soul, or part of it, which is perhaps the longest in history. It may have involved 60 sub-proofs in that book. But instead, I, Joseph B. Thorne, think it is far better to give a very long proof of the existence of God and hundreds of other proofs to help strengthen it, and this is what I have done. Since that is the key issue, and once God is known to exist, then we are immortal, since it is illogical that such a powerful God would let us perish. Oh God, unless Spinoza was misunderstood, exclamation mark, maybe his goal was to show that we are gods ourselves, and then it suffices to show that we are immortal, and Spinoza's system is really not pantheism, but polytheism, since he believed that humanity or parts of our mind are immortal, unlike the view of the Aristotelians, and so